No, that's not going to work. All right, let's see how we can get this set up. No, all right. Yeah, I'm not sure how to test. I wish I could. Um, but I'm going to put in a quick welcome. Any who join. Talk me. We go via chat. All right. There we go. So I am, no. Okay. So at this point, and folks, here's where some interesting things are going on. Of course, we're trying to keep keep the world together. Um, and um, sorry, let's see. I need to put this down here. There we go. Now I'm looking at it. All right, so this is new, and yeah, it kind of looks like a halo behind my head. So we're going to have to change some things around. I'm getting lighting together for the first time, but let's do that. Let's do here. I made it a little darker, so I'm going to see if I can amp up some other ambient light here. So, woo, that's bright. See if we can put that on it. All right. That gives me a little bit from that side. Let's see if we can get a little bit from this side. Just trying to make it easier for you guys as we go forward because, by the way, this is my office. Yeah, so I have another camera on order and I'll have a green screen here. So next week, because I think I'm going to be doing this fairly regularly, I need input as I'm creating things now that I'm at home all the time. I need input. So I'm going to find ways to do work, but do it in kind of an open format like this. So others can either join alongside, almost like we were at the coffee shop together, or yeah, that kind of thing. So I can get ideas from you, and maybe you can get some ideas that you can take. So I know this is a first time. We're trying it out here on YouTube Live. So we drop this. And let's bring over the flip chart. Can you see that? You can see it partially. Okay. Let's see. Tilt that just a little bit more. So I'm going to be in and out, obviously, of this as we go. All right. So that's the best lighting that I've got now. So got my markers. Here's what I am trying to do. I've been tasked to create leadership development in a new way, to rethink this for a particular client. Now, I've been working with this client for some time. Yeah, I've been doing leadership development with this client for some time. We're now, of course, on the coronavirus footing, which means I can't get together with them. They can't get together with me in person. Now, typically the way we've done it in this has been series of in-person meetings, meeting with the executive leadership team to kind of do some design work and some big picture thinking about the culture we want and the leaders that we want to have in our organization. But from there, once we got a basic understanding of what we were trying to achieve with the leaders, then I'd pull stuff together and we would meet. And most of these were blocks of 4 hours at a time in person with a good deal of group talk that happened. I present some concepts. I'm showing a PowerPoint, um, and so presenting concepts, and then trying to stimulate a lot of conversation among the group. Right, so it's small group, small tables, team table setup, and um, yeah, so that's the basic format. And, doing those half day meetings. Well, that's kind of off the table at this point. So, how do we create something new? The good news is that this client, rather than many clients are just saying, oh, we got to stop all this work. This client said, no, let's just reframe how we do this. Let's think about how we keep doing this because we started some good work and we want to keep it going. So, that's all of the background for what I'm here to do today. Now, as I'm going to be doing, kind of go internal here and be doing a lot of thinking and putting what I think up on here. And again, anyone that drops in, give me ideas as we're talking. So. Um, yeah, so putting up here, one of the things that the framework that's in my head, like how do you begin to reconceptualize remote leadership development? All right, really, how do we blow the top off of this and start, clear the decks and start from the beginning? A framework in the back of my head is what's called choice analysis. It's a systematic problem. I'm sorry, decision making um, frame. So I may kind of teach a little bit about that to you also as we're going along because it's a superb way when you need to make a decision. It's an important decision and the answers aren't obvious. The best option is not obvious. So, anyway, that's where I'm at the moment. So, going to turn over the flip chart. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Let's see if I'm looking for the notes that I made earlier. Mhm. There we go. Okay. Okay. So the first step in this, just like any other decision, is to be clear on what our choice statement is. What is it I am trying to work on? So simple as that sounds, that is the starting place. You got to be able to put it in words because if you don't, you're going to lose focus throughout. So I want to define outline a structure, rather, outline the best remote leadership development structure. Okay, that's my choice statement. By the way, a little teaching on might as well do a little teaching on the process itself. So when we're doing choice analysis, this process, it begins with the choice statement. And the choice statement has three components. The three components are the result that you'll have in your hand, some kind of verb, right? What is it? We're choosing, we're deciding, we're creating, something like that. and then any key qualifiers. So in this case, my result is a structure or an outline of a structure. That's what I'll have in hand when I get done with this. And the key qualifiers, the outline actually is my verb. That's what I'm going to do there. And then best and remote leadership development. Those are all the key qualifiers. That determines what it is I'm going to seek to create at this point. So the next step, once you know that, is to then begin to define your criteria. That is, before you start putting out all the different options, what makes the best structure the best? How would you know it? What will it give you? What results will it provide? What resources must it conserve or expend? What constraints do you have to operate within? So that's the criteria, and I've already done a little bit of thinking here. So, see anybody on with me? All right, just me at the moment. That's okay. All right, let's see. So in this world right now, remote is already there. So in some ways, maybe this is restating what's already there. But the best structure will maintain, actually it's not, maintain social distancing for everyone. So that's kind of what brought us to this point anyway. Okay, so the best structure will maintain social distancing. So I'm not sure actually, because I haven't done the analysis on this before, but I think I have the suspicion that how we've gone about leadership development, the actual teaching and training of it, doesn't necessarily accord with what is known about what makes for best learning. So I'm going to put that in there actually as a criteria also. The best leadership development structure will align, I guess that's the way I'd say it, align with the science of learning, what is known about how people learn. Actually, yeah, how people learn. Okay, yep. So what other things do I want my hope that it gives me? I would love for the best leadership development structure to be I'm trying to think of the word for it. I want to minimize cost. That's what I want it to do. Minimize, the best structure will minimize cost to me and to whomever my client is, right? So the structure itself. So be cost effective, or I'll just say minimize costs. That's what I'm going to do. That's an easy way. Minimize. And by that, I mean literally dollars. yen if you're in China, pounds if you're in Britain. Um, so while we're talking about what I want it to minimize, the best leadership development structure will minimize creation time. Now, by the way, for those of you who may see this at a future date, you'll notice that some of these things, we're not saying, when I put up criteria here, I'm not already determining in my head that whatever I choose must perfectly match all of these. That's getting way ahead of yourself. And that is what oftentimes gives you the vapor lock when you're actually trying to make a decision. Okay. What I'm putting out here is all the things I would love for it to do. And then later on in the decision process, we'll actually see, is there any structure, which structures give me more or less of these that I want? Okay, so I may have something that is, I may choose something, the best options that I can come up with, can create, can design, and pull together from anywhere else. May be very cheap, might minimize cost, but it might take a whole lot of time to pull together. So, but I want both, right? I want something that I can have instantaneously that costs nothing, that I can then sell for $1 million, which actually is truly another criterion for me in the creation stage. Now, this is not is oh yeah, creates, uh, maximizes opportunities. That's what I want for future monetization. Okay. All right. And that's just me thinking as a business person right now. And how do I keep this going? Okay. So, all right. That doesn't though get, so this talks about some of the things that I wanted to, and what it has to have, right? This is what put us here. And this is thinking about the actual pulling it together and what it'll do for me, big picture. But I want to actually have some criterion here that talk about the quality it must possess, right? What makes for a superb um, leadership development curricula. Um, okay. So, accessible. On multiple platforms. While we're talking accessibility, I'd like it to be accessible. That, by the way, is my cat, which just came in. She needs to go through to her litter box. Yes, in the other room. So it's charity, by the way. Yeah. Okay. So accessible on multiple platforms, accessible asynchronously. Um, okay, so that's accessibility. So again, back to what are some of the qualities? What should it produce for me? I I want it um I want it to be interactive. Um, Yeah, engaging, but that's part of what I mean by interactive too. By the way, another, how do you come up with good criteria? You don't say the same thing, label it as different criteria, but you're just using slightly different words. So if I could put engaging, but when I'd ask myself, well, what produces engaging? Well, interactive is a lot of it. Um, of course, I want it to be, well, actually, not of course, reflects or incorporates, maybe that's a better way of saying it. Incorporates is based on um, best current thinking and research. And oh, by the way, I'm breaking one of my own rules for good criteria. Good criteria usually don't have an and in them because then it's saying, can we have something that reflects current best thinking, but not best research, or something that reflects? Most of the time, you want to break apart and have them as two separate criteria. I mean the same thing though. It's just a different way to capture it in my head. Um, so the best leadership curriculum is not pop psychology. Um, and when I say current, that may not be. It doesn't mean it has to be new, right? So some of the best thinking is 50 years old. In my opinion, some of the best thinking about what leadership is and how it's exercised hasn't, was written 50, 60 years ago. And folks have just found different ways to repackage it. So current just means, when I say best current thinking, it just means it stands up today, but it doesn't necessarily mean, not new. Okay. Bye, Charity. Okay. All right. Now, let's see. Interactive, incorporates best thinking leadership. I want it to, I'm not sure exactly how to word this, but I actually want it to lead, directly produce, and this is part of what I know about learning. I want it to drive to action. It can't be, oh, this was great. And took a few minutes and I thought about something. And now let's get back to work, and it doesn't impact. It must impact practice for it to actually be something that's worthwhile. Okay, so the best leadership development structure incorporates practice. Now this, I'm on a slippery slope. This actually would be considered a feature as opposed to a criteria. You want to avoid saying where it's not driving me to one, it's just reminding me of the kind of characteristics. But the best thinking says, well, what does that produce for you then? So where was I? Incorporates best thinking. Oh, incorporates, builds in immediate, and I'm putting that there, immediate practice. Now let's see, can you still see that? Yeah, I'm going to toss it down one more time because I've got just one or two more off the top of my head. the best will, yeah, particularly today, where many of the people who are um, going to be the recipients of this, they might be, who knows, they might be at home by themselves. So we know that people somehow need to connect. So the best leadership development curriculum is going to um, incorporate socialization. Yeah. Hmm. Now, when you're doing criteria, you don't necessarily, and by the way, I only had one or two of these thoughts, so it really is, I'm thinking through this the way one actually uses choice analysis. Yeah, but you don't have to keep going with criteria on and on and on and on until you get absolutely every last thing that could possibly be. I mean, what you do is pretty much like what I've been doing. You ask the questions, what is it that this structure, now that we know what it is we're going after, what is it that this leadership development structure, what will it give to us? What will it produce for us? What resources must it incorporate? Okay, so socialization, that's one of the things that I'm saying. It's really important that it have that. Um, what what resources do we want to conserve? I want to conserve time to create. Actually, minimize creation time. I want to minimize to the degree that I can, with learning happening. I want to minimize time spent by the participant in front of the screen or doing it. I want this to be so powerful that in the ideal world they could watch for 1 minute and they would be super leaders immediately. Okay, so I want to minimize. What am I trying to say? Uh, 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 Participation time. Yeah. All right. So I got one more. Yeah. So minimize participation time. Um, yeah. So, and actually, that's another great example of how choice analysis actually works. Is you're kind of reviewing them. You, or if it's doing with a group, somebody else in the group will go, "Oh yeah, but what about this?" And you'll have it. You had to. What I was going to say was, we can get wherever you start to kind of run dry, just call it right there, and then people can add to it later as it becomes obvious that there's something you want or don't want that's not already reflected in your criteria. So it's a list you can add to. Okay, so now bringing up coffee, the elixir of life. Okay, once you have your criteria, um, typically speaking, what we would tell people to do, and I'm not going to do this for myself right now, particularly because it's just me, right? Uh, and I don't. What we typically tell people to do is, before you may go on and begin thinking about actually what the options are, what are the different structures or components of different structures you might pull into place, before you start looking at those options, you decide which of these criteria are mandatory. That is, if that one is not included, the option is useless. It doesn't meet my minimum requirements for whatever this is. So which are mandatory? And then of the remaining um, criteria, how important is each one relative to the others? Because as I mentioned earlier, I want all of this, but it's an imperfect world, so I'm not going to get all of it. I don't have any resources, neither do my clients. So, which of these are most important, or how important are they relative to the others? And you do that with a numbering system. Um, and so, in another video, another time, I will lay out that. And in fact, I may even use this as a framework for it. So, this is what I know I want. So I'm going to need to be able to keep kind of referring back to this. But now that I know that this is what it should create for me, now I can begin to start conceptualizing about the structure itself, which I'm sure if you're just tuning in, or if you happen to see this, I'll tell people if you want to go right to the actual part where we're creating it, yeah, you're going to need to skip a half hour in. So that's okay. This is lagniappe, people. Lagniappe, it's a word from southern Louisiana. It means extra, freebie. You didn't sign up for it, but we gave it to you anyway. So, all right. First part was lagniappe. All right, now, here's how I thought I would go about, oops, trying to find my notes from earlier. Bear with. Okay. We're really blowing the top off of this. It's got to be remote. All right, so there's a couple of things. I mean, I could go put mandatory, but it is a remote, right? We're not able to get in touch with each other. What excites me about this is that I don't have to. I can get creative here. Let's just blow the doors off. I defined best on the other side what that meant for me. So now let's start thinking about what that might look like. Here's what I want to do. We're going to put this into two categories, if you will. Let's see. All right. Here's what we're going to do. Who, when, what. Yeah, we'll just try that. I could put where, but we've already defined that we're going to do it online and that it must be accessible. So I don't even literally need to think about that. But what I want to do is I want to start questioning my assumptions. So that's what we're going to title this. Questioning assumptions. And this is typical. And this is, we'll just call it creative. That's it. And this is where I would benefit more from having some other people involved in this process with me. But you'll just have to see how I go through it. Here's what I'm going to do. There's so many things that how do we do things better? That's always asked. And what we fail to recognize most of the time when we're trying to improve is that we're building off a series of unconscious assumptions that we are sure are how the world must work. And so because those assumptions are made, we often end up with changes that are not too different. I mean, what we're trying to innovate doesn't look too different than what we had before. And it's because we failed to define, specify, point out those things which we're already taking for granted, and then begin to question them, deliberately stretch them, go crazy with them. Okay, so again, I didn't have this answer. This is real time how one stretches oneself and begins to push for innovative. So, what you do is for whatever the given topic is, and ours again is learning, leadership development, how that is typically done. And I think we can even say, well, how is even remote leadership development typically done? And then what would it look like to stretch it? So, with that, I'm going to draw a little line down here. So, we're going to define typical in these areas. And then we're going to spend time and go over and what would it mean to look at it differently. I don't know what I'll come up with, but it's a start. So let's go there. So okay, well, typical people involved in leadership development are hypos, high potentials, managers, oftentimes frontline supervisors. That's probably most typical. So I mean, just to stretch that, because we are now talking for this, who we have a frontline in one company. Okay. When, I mean, I could go either way. I could spend time either way, but I think what I'm going to do is just try to get out my ideas, broadly speaking, about how it's done now, and then just kind of play with it otherwise. So when is it typically done? Well, the when, particularly for this company, has been schedule blocks, um, 4 hours at a time. Now, that's what worked for them. In my head, actually, prior to working with this client, most of my leadership development work was 1 day, kind of as the minimum, oftentimes 2 days. And of course, that's been shrinking for industries before now. And when I started working with this client about a year and a half ago, they just said, hey, you know what? The most we can get people away from their desk at any one time is a half day. So that became our standard. So, particularly for this one, 4 hours at a time. And by the way, when I say scheduled blocks, I mean just, yeah, we'd say, hey, let's look at the calendar. Let's put it, 5 weeks out. When everyone could get together. And why did we do it when everyone could be present? Well, partly that was an expense issue, right? Because they can't have me coming back, every week or every other day for 2 or 3 people at a time. So it's an economy of scale issue. That's not a problem with remote, but it was also, so that's for, let me just put this, and that was the reason, that was for dollars conservation and for interaction, right? much of what I know about how people actually learn. Well, you have to be engaged. Here's some basics, right? Like, push this aside. If you're not um, learning a pedagogical professional, a teacher, that was my master's was in teaching. People learn when have to take they get information that, of course, I mean, before they'll even receive the information, they have to perceive it as worthy. Otherwise, they'll tune you out, right? So it's got to be relevant, important, and so on and so forth. They've got to perceive it to be that way. But once they perceive it that way, information comes in, and then they must translate it. That is, they must take it and internally apply it to a particular situation. They must, if they are, this is why we tell people to take notes. Literally, I still give out handouts because I want people to write. I know that they will actually learn more as when they have to take all that I'm saying and it touched something in them and they started writing it down. That act of translation is the point where it becomes real. So I want, the instructor, said it, then they heard it as it meant something to the people that they were with, and now they're combining that or uh, comparing that information with their own understanding, with the world as they've experienced it so far, to identify, oh, that is true. There's something there that's meaningful for me. Therefore, let me write it down. Cements it in. That's what that's how learning happens. That's why most of the time when you can't do that, when it's just screen after screen after screen of PowerPoints and it's just information without opportunity to digest, talk, translate, do all that kind of stuff, why it fails to register the needle. You may take a note or two, remember one or two things, but for the most part, it doesn't really change anything and you forget it. Okay, so Lanyap again, folks. That's how learning happens. So, um, so that's what. And so I was talking about when amped up the interaction. What? And I guess let me put in another block. And I'm not sure. I probably don't have enough room. I've got how. Um, so now, what? So as I think of what, I guess I'm thinking of topics. Yeah, topics. I mean, I'm just kind of bouncing around in my head some of the different bits of information. So yeah, let's just keep going here. So, um, um, influence. Influence, what it is, the definition of leadership. That's a typical discussion. Um, the what best, comparing best and worst leaders. That's a typical discussion. People can, as they think about leaders they've known. That's a great flip chart to do with groups and help them describe, then help them see which of those, how other people might describe themselves, them actually. So great discussion. So best, worst leaders. Communication is always huge. And by that, typically we're talking about when I've done communication, it's been communication in a broad way, typically in person and verbal. So those are some of the things that in person and verbal communication, um, and then specifics around communication, which looked at, well, hello, whoever just joined. Thank you so much here. Um, yeah, bring you back for what it's worth, and feel free to stay as long as you want. I want to create a different paradigm for how leadership development is done. I need to do so because my client has asked me for this. The good news is they didn't cancel everything out. So feel free to provide any comments or thoughts in the chat, and as I see them, I'll try to address them. This, I just spent a good bit of time trying to figure out what it is I'm trying to create. I want to outline the best remote leadership development structure. So at the end of this conversation, I'm gonna have a structure and then spend a lot of time going, well, okay, what do I mean by best? What makes best best? It's got to maintain social distance. It aligns with the science of learning. Is the hopefully it's the cheapest and it's the fastest. And I can spend more time if you'd like to dialogue around this. This is not saying I get all of these, but this in an ideal world is what I want. I'm not sure you can see that. Let's see if you can see that because of, yeah, the lighting. Okay. So that's what it is that I'm trying to create. And now here's how we're going about the work. The work is, let's start questioning our own assumptions. How has leadership development always been done? And I'm just filling in typical. I'll get to the creative where we just kind of blow the doors off as an intellectual exercise. What does different really look like? So typically the people involved are high potentials, managers, frontline leaders, and they're typically all in one company. When training is typically done, it's typically in scheduled blocks. Could be different for you, but for me, most of the time, people are blocking half days, and so that's what I've been doing workshops in. When everyone could be present in order to conserve money and promote interaction between people. And I'm just to the place now where I'm listing what are the typical topics involved in leadership development. So, and this is where, if you're with me and you have some ideas about what you've seen as part of leadership development curriculum, put them up here and I'll add them because that's what I'm about. So anyway, influence, the definition of leadership, comparing best leaders and worst leaders. That's oftentimes a discussion. And then doing communication, which to define, because communication is so broad, the kind of communication I typically am talking about in leadership development is big picture, it's in person and it's verbal. So that's where we are now. So then oftentimes spend feedback. And by that, we're talking about how leaders give positive feedback and critical feedback. We oftentimes, there's something about self-awareness, as in knowing one's own personality styles, how one typically presents oneself, and have used various personality assessments typically given beforehand as part of that. A DISC, for example, Myers-Briggs. So some part of that is them people understanding themselves more. There's oftentimes a discussion on trust, um, performance issues. That's probably the last topic that's typical for me. And I could go on and on to list, but again, we're creating a frame that allows us to be creative. Now, the next part is how is training typically done? Okay, now some of that we already know by what we've talked about so far. So we know that it is in person. But how else do we want to talk about this? What else could give us? So, how is in person? One-time shots of information, right? Some people say we inoculate people around leadership like a shot. But yeah, that's typically how it's done. It's, hey, let's get them together, let's throw information at them, and then they're back to work. There is little follow-up. I think oftentimes that is because, hey, they've already expended 4 hours of their time. There's little follow-up. What else? What else is typical of how? In person, one time, little follow-up. Yeah, in a conference room. I'm not sure what else. Let's see if there's anything else that comes to me as I look at the particular criteria. Is there anything that's typical about how it's done? Yeah, it's not accessible at a later date, so it's not recorded. Anything else jump out? Anything else jump out? Okay. So one other piece that's also typical about how it's done is that we all have to move forward together. So I'll present a topic and then I'll say, okay, so reflect at your tables or have a discussion at your tables about this leadership concept, right? And I'll give them a task. Well, table one might finish in 2 minutes, and then they're just thumbing through on their phone because table two is really into it, but it's taking them longer to develop their thoughts. So we're all speed-wise limited. Speed, we all move forward together. I'll just put that. That's what's typical. All right. All right. That's our typical. Now's the fun part where we start getting creative. And by the way, again, you're not making your decision at this point. I'm using a framework called choice analysis. At this point, we're not making a decision. We're not going to say it's going to be whatever goes down here on this right side. All we're doing is we're giving our brains the freedom to really stretch. And let's just do stuff. What would creative is almost not the right word. It almost should be crazy. Um, and then the best may have some information from here. It may have some information from this side. It may be something that we think of as we compare both and we choose a third way that's kind of in the middle. But that's what we're doing. Um, Pardon for just a moment. There's beeping in the next room. I've got to turn off the beeper. So 20 seconds. I'm back. All right, I am back. All right. So with this, what would crazy look like? So it's not, in fact, it's targeted. So that's a way of thinking about it. It's targeted to, that kind of includes most people who are leaders. What would crazy look like? I'll just put targeted to non-leaders, whatever that means. I'm not even sure what that means, but I'm going with my own structure here. Non-leaders. We'll say people without formal position. That's what I mean by that. No formal position of authority. Okay. All right. So, what would different creative look like? Creative to the borders of crazy. So it could be, yeah, let's just keep playing with it. So we're no longer limited by time, right? So we could have some kind of schedule. So I still want to get interaction, right? And I think there's still something to be said as part of the how. Because again, this aligns with what we know about learning. I want people to be able to talk, connect with one another. I think is going to be even more important over the weeks and months ahead as COVID sets in. So some kind of lineup where we can have a schedule, and I'm thinking a sign up where a particular cohort can say we will meet. So we'll be cohort / learning pod. Where we can sign up and move through it together. We are going to be yeah. Hmm. Hmm. So in this case, I just remembered something. Because of the company deciding that they were going to spend time on bringing this leadership consultant in from somewhere who cost a lot of money, people were required to attend, right? That was the deal. So the who was, if we say you're coming, required attendance. Now, so this is, if we push it, it's voluntary. push that to the end. So people just sign up, right? Okay. Okay. All right, back to it. Schedule blocks 4 at a time. So we're talking about when right now. Sign up for it. That's one way of doing it. Sign up for it as a group that you're going to go through. Okay. So if we're talking about it, it's of course. So that's one thing. And I'll just keep them one at a time. The second point was 4 hours at a time. Um, how do we break this up into? I won't say a minute. I honestly, I don't know. Maybe I do that just as a creative exercise, right? But much shorter. Maybe it's a uh, snippets. What? Yeah, I'm just putting snippets here because I don't know the actual bite-sized chunks. Um, as a learning professional, again, one of the actually I don't have it listed on my previous criteria, but one of the mandatory criteria is that it must help people learn. If it's not helping people learn, it's just I'm getting paid, but it's a waste of the company's resources. So it must be about how are people different when it's done. So I'm baking in some of what I already know. And I could go crazy and put down, oh, it can happen in 30-second intervals. People don't learn that way. So because the brain can't pick that up like that, you know, and while I say that, I go, but wait a second. Tweets? Is it possible? Because there are, when I'm looking at my Twitter feed, there are things that from time to time I go, oh, that's smart. Ooh, that touches me. Now, it's not enough by itself. I don't think actually Twitter teaches because while it can touch, there's nothing you have to do with it. And so it gets lost. It kind of maybe in some, uh, um, there's an atom in your being that is different than it was before. It hasn't really affected your practice. So I would say learning practically hasn't happened from a tweet, but tweet, which we then do something with. Okay. So, wow, that's interesting. That's interesting. So we're saying when everyone could be present. This is saying if there's a cohort of learning pod, when uh, I want to, so somehow pushing it all the way to the end is asynchronous. I can get there whenever I want. But somehow that structure of learning is still supported. Okay. How? That's a different question. How we do that. All right, there we go. So creative crazy. Let's keep going with this here. So what would be different? Oh, now this is where this is truly brainstorming stuff. If you're tuned in and you have thoughts about stuff you wanted to see as part of leadership development, but you've never seen, please go ahead and send me those thoughts in the chat bar. All right. And I will progress with what I believe. No, it's not going to be stupid stuff. Right. So I'm not going to do the logical just to play on the crazy end and just toss out bogus information. So it does have to be what do I think is appropriate but untouched. Um, let me put that down. Appropriate, relevant, but typically typically not covered. So, I mean, or not covered well. And this gets down to what you think leadership means and what it involves. Oh, wow. So, this may get, it's somehow getting from the what into the how. So there's going to be some bleed over here. But the first uh, creative thought that came to my mind is what if we minimize a lot of this talk? What if it were to be a snippet that then involved, you know, reflection, um, and I want to say action of some kind. Hmm. Just put it up there. I'm not exactly sure what that means. I don't have a perfectly formed idea in my head. Oh, that's an up arrow. What? So somehow leadership is around relationships. So exploring one's particular golly, wow, this is we just got into the really deep stuff, the hard stuff. Why is this hard right now? Because we know what we know, and I've always taught the topics that I thought were important because I thought they were important. So asking what would be crazy to talk about, right? So maybe it's not different, but it's taking this to the level we don't think we could do. Um, Starting to get there, starting to play around. I'm thinking about a cohort of people that okay. Uh, so I was gonna, I guess, where the basis for authenticity. Okay, so if that sounds um, authentic leadership, being who you truly are. Okay, I've pushed that away as saying, that's pretty weak sauce. Okay, that makes all of leadership just an internal focus, but maybe something there. So I was just finishing that. where I just went in was, what if this is, I'm back, I kind of like this cohort idea. This is a learning team that high trust, by definition, that rates each other on, on these. So they learn something. Uh, so could build in some observations. Now, this is all stuff that's done not when I'm there. I mean, oh yeah, but that means they've got to be able to see each other. Oops. Yeah, and in the world that we're in right now, most of their work is going to be done at home. So let me put a question mark behind observation. That would be interesting to see how we could do that. I can carry a GoPro with us, right? You can see me. Or you know what? So let's get into some stuff we know needs to be part of the what. And this is not getting crazy. This is just the demands of today. It's remote management, what that means. So these are topics. I think we've got to rethink, as part of remote management, we need to rethink how we whether we and how we measure productivity at home. Okay, which does get people into something that we've always known about good leaders, is that good leaders manage for the results, right? We don't focus how you do whatever you do. I don't care. It's not true. I may have some opinions on the better ways to do what you're doing, but if you're effective, if you're achieving the results, which is really what we focus our thoughts on, here's what we got to get out of this. I just make sure you have what you need, and then you're left or supported or empowered to go make it happen, right? So we've known that forever and ever, but now this puts that's the only way to manage. I guess because people can't look over other people's shoulders, or if they try to, it will be amazingly unproductive and will sap up the manager's time. So remote management, rethinking how we measure productivity, being productive at home. And while we're at work-life balance just took on that's probably not even the right term. Work-life balance, but basically, how do you stay healthy? How do you with our needs for socialization? So much of what we've needed in terms of our interaction has happened as we pass each other or work with each other in cubicles or down the hallway. You don't have that anymore. Oh, but you may have children right with you in the same room or the next room over. So how you keep your sanity is not right. It's just we're not used to those kind of stresses, and those little people have needs. And how do we meet their needs? Well, we're trying to meet our needs, and somebody's on the line with us, and so there's new stresses that we have to understand and deal with. So that's part of leadership. Um, helping, supporting teammates, right? Helping team um, support. Yeah. Helping team adjust to new world. Which, by the way, let me flip this over for just a second. And I think it's important as we're talking about, I think there's some fundamentals about what leadership, what it is. So let me just really define that right now. And then let's see if that helps. Leadership is getting a group of people to come together and make something happen. Okay, now you could say it differently. You could say they want to do it. I don't care. Those are minor details. It's I have we're going to improve. We're going to create something of value that the company values, the people who are paying us, right? So, and the leader is what helps get a group of people to take all that energy that is from energy, knowledge, experience from all these different folks and make that happen. Okay. So, goal achieved efficiently and effectively. And the value that the leader brings is in, yeah, the group of people might be able to do it on their own, but I help you do it better and quicker. So, but there's only three big picture pieces in my head. What is leadership? Direction. That's what we're trying to create. So being clear on expectations, everybody knowing what they need to be focusing on. How do they balance what they're doing? Oh, by the way, that light just got way bright. Pardon. Let's see if you can see it. Okay, that's a little bit better. Okay, so direction is the first part. Support. And there's support is just giving you what you need so that you can do what you need to do. Okay, so there's emotional support, there's physical support, all the resources, tools, time, etc., that the company is responsible for making sure you have. And I, as your leader, I am the person most directly responsible for that. So why? Well, I tell you what, my light situation. Let's try that. That's a little bit better. Okay, so direction, support is just giving you what you need in various ways. Many leaders who are called bad leaders, actually, let me just give you the third one because bad leaders will screw up in all three areas and sometimes all three areas. But the last part's accountability. Accountability just means there's some way of tracking how well you are doing, if you're my direct report, or the team is doing, how we are doing and moving towards a goal. So we have some way of tracking. We keep our eye on that, and then we have a conversation. And that's what accountability is. And the conversation is everything from you're doing awesome because I can see we're meeting. That's exercising accountability. To, you know what, you're no longer part of our team. Goodbye. That's also accountability. And there's various ways to do it in between. By the way, I'm giving you the simple fundamentals of leadership right here. That's what this is: direction, support, and accountability. When people are poor leaders, they screw up and they're not clear in their direction. It's vague, it shifts, it moves, it changes. They're not providing the support, whether that's the tools you need to do it, the time you need to do it, a conducive environment, the ability to socialize and connect with people. Respecting someone else is giving them support to do the work that they need to do. So this is where a lot of what we understand about human needs. It comes into this support bucket. Accountability is just saying there's a scoreboard, and people can do accountability poorly in one of two ways. Big picture is either we don't talk about it. I'm muddled on it. I may have given you, assuming I gave you direction, I'm not tracking, or I'm not willing to come up and just say, hey, let's talk about this because this isn't meeting what I needed. Or they go the other direction and they come down and they're jerks, and so they make the person feel bad and blame it on the person when actually what's known is that when work doesn't happen, it's not a function of the individual most of the time. Almost all the time, it's a function of the system that we put in place for the individual in which they work because people want to do good work. I'm having fun here, actually. I love to teach. Um, and this gives me a chance to kind of talk about some of the things that are important to me. So I'm enjoying it. Thanks for allowing me to do that. But back to where we're going, which is we're trying to create, if you'll go with me, this is what leadership is right here. This is what there is to learn. Then all of the things that we typically talk about in terms of leadership are just subcategories in these buckets. So, what are some of these? Let's just kind of play with that for just a minute because I think this is significant. So when we talk about direction, so being able to understand and create a vision is part of being able to come to our people and give appropriate direction. Purpose, strategy. Now, oftentimes these are done by the top people in the organization. That doesn't mean they do them well, right? And those are all part of being able to provide direction. What else goes into that? There's classes on forward thinking. How do I, as a leader, foresee what opportunities are out there on the horizon, or identify opportunities that are, or threats, and then begin to take those into account? That's all about our ability to provide direction to our people. Yeah. And there's a little bit of a bleed over, right? Because by the time we're talking about support, a structure in place to accomplish the direction is also there. So forward thinking would say, hey, this is what we need to refocus on. That's how it comes in direction. But it will also tie into support. Oh, and here's how we need to change our structure in order to go with our renewed focus. There's a little bit of bleed over between these topics, but that's typically where I'd put that. What else? When we teach people about expectations, that's also part of direction. Okay, so that's all under here. Support. So relationships, all of and by the way, it oftentimes doesn't come out that way in a leadership development curricula. They're not talking relationships per se, but you will hear stuff talked about personality differences. This is where some of our work now, depending upon what your company sees as its core values, that's where some core value training will come in. So, as in a couple of companies that come to mind that I've worked with in the past, one of the things that they've said was a core value for them was humility. because why does this point to the support that we give our people to do the work that they need to do, again, in that structure that I'm outlining for you? It's because the company has determined that humility is what's needed as part of our relationships. It's what best provides the environment for people to do the work. So it's training so that you can, if you're a leader, so that you can provide the support so that people can do the work. So core values around humility, that kind of training. Oftentimes some of our, actually, so put one up here, there's communication around this. There are better and worse ways to actually communicate direction. So there's skills training around that, but there's also communication training here. How you communicate the support for your people. I think another piece, actually, if you're not familiar, a great way of thinking about all of these, but it particularly helps frame out support, is 6 boxes thinking, right? Actually, where I put it, because in some ways, yeah, I'll just put 6 boxes right here. Check out other videos on my site, and I go into depth about what the 6 boxes are. What else? So I could put more around support when we think of typically training that's done around leading teams. That is also done here. And let's see. I'm pushing on an hour and a half here, folks. I'm going to finish this one up. We're going to pause it, and then I may return here in a little while, or I'll schedule a second phase tomorrow to keep going. But let's frame it. Why am I talking here? Back up, just as a reminder. We've been trying to blow the doors off here. Start to question our assumptions. This is what typical training is. This is what something new might look like. Now, it's not saying, again, that we're going to do everything on this side. But as we start to question assumptions, some of the things we put are naturally going to be things we go, oh, that could be cool. But it doesn't mean we have to. So you've got the ability to think freely and then reject things that you go, no, that really doesn't make sense for our organization, and it's still good. So we've been talking about Creative Crazy, and we're breaking down to get at our assumptions. We're thinking about who, when, what, how is training typically done, and then what would look differently in the who, when, what, and how. We're in the what, and we're starting to get to, so what are some different ways of thinking about the what of leadership training? What kind of topics do we need to be talking about? And that's when I said, hey, pause, because anything that we put on this list has to go back to what you fundamentally believe leadership is. Hence the digression, or not the deeper down the rabbit hole. It wasn't a digression. It's no, we got to go one step further. Or as in Inception, the dream within a dream within a dream, and then we'll start falling our way back out. Great movie, by the way. So this is leadership. These are the fundamentals, fundamental functions. Let's just title this. Fundamental leadership functions. And that's direction, support, and accountability. And then what we're blowing out to the side are the typical things the typical topics that are part of a leadership curricula that you might see that actually are just different ways of kind of getting more specific about how people direct, support, and hold others accountable, because that's leadership. Okay. So, yes, so let's finish up. There is more to say, I think, in the support point, I know, but it's just escaping me at the moment. So, just to kind of round out this discussion, accountability. Yeah, so what typically is part of that? This is how you have I call them performance conversations, critical feedback, getting people realigned or back on course or so on and so forth. Again, people do it poorly. And although this is often not a training, if you will, it really is a structure that the company should set up. Actually, I wanted to do that in a different. You know what? I'm going to write over that green because I want it to stand out differently. So we're going to go with brown. This is going to be ugly, but performance conversations. Okay, so the other part that is kind of just locked up in performance conversations is a performance structure, performance management. Those are big bogeyman terms. Everybody uses the term performance management, and I don't know that we all even agree on what we mean by that. Performance management is the idea. Actually, performance management involves all three of these. Okay. But when we get down to the particulars here of how we maintain accountability, it means we're keeping our eye on the ball. We have some kind of metrics we're tracking. And oftentimes, as part of this is the cascaded goals. Okay, now there's a structure in place, which is really about you as leader then having a conversation around the goals. These all tie together. They really do. You need them all if you're going to do this well. But that's really what, how do you keep your eye on the ball? It's just tracking and talking. So, yeah, there you go. So this is the fundamental leadership functions and typical leadership topics. Typical leadership topics. So what we need to be thinking about as kind of the next step, actually, I'm going to go back and I'm going to finish a little bit on the previous page. But I think what will be the focus will be literally a topic list of the next video, next stream that we do. So let me come back to here. Let's see if we can frame out how it's the what's the logical alternatives, the crazy alternatives to having training that is in person, one-time shots. That is, we zap them with information, inoculate them with some leadership training, with little follow-up. You're doing it in a conference room, it's not recorded. So I want something in terms of the how. I'm just going to put this out there as kind of the crazy, because in some ways it encapsulates for me, and there could be more things. I want an ongoing conversation. I want continual practice and improvement. Okay. Hmm. Wow. So where are we? I'm not yet ready. So what's the very practical part of doing this work today was to begin to identify something that I need to go back to the client um, tomorrow, tomorrow or Monday. I do have the weekend if I need to take it. Um, but to go back and say, hey, here's what we need to be doing about leadership development right now. Um, and although I must present to them something that I think fits within their time constraints and something that fits, budget and all that other kind of stuff. I got to take some of those practicals. I'm stressed, like many of us with COVID, with the new way of working, but it's coming out, I think, and it's producing some positive outcomes. Yes, while it needs to be realistic, what I present to the client, I actually, I'm gonna get a little crazy. Let's blow the doors off. Let's do something that hasn't been seen in corporate learning and development thus far. Let's see if we can create something that's new and valuable because of the constraints that have been placed upon us. So I'm going to follow this up with a, another video. I will probably schedule it for roughly the same time tomorrow because I need to keep working on this. And I'll be doing it here. What I may end up doing tomorrow is actually seeing if I can find a way to show my screen. I'm not sure how to do that yet, but I'll try to figure it out between today and tomorrow because I think a fair amount of what I'm going to be doing is going to be, uh, typing on the computer. I think. Anyway, um, if you for the few on right now, thank you for joining. I hope you got something you can use out of this. And if you end up seeing this afterwards, yeah, I hope this is useful for you. Again, I didn't exactly plan this out. It's I was following a thinking process. If you want to know more about choice analysis, which is the decision choice process that was going in my head, let me know. It's a great way. Oh, it's a great way of helping people think better. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate your time, and we may see one another again soon.